Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Flow Within. I'm your host, Tony G. Today I'm so delighted to be talking with my friend Bear Redmond of Bear and the Beast, and they recently got signed. Bear, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good.
Good, man. It's good seeing you. It's been a long time.
It's been a while, global pandemics and everything.
Yeah.
Glad we're alive.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, we were playing a show together, I think at Globe Hall.
Yeah.
Many years ago.
Oh, man, so long ago. But, yeah.
What's the last show that you guys have played?
Last show I think we played the High Dive a couple not too long ago. Yeah, Saturday night. So I think that was one of the things that really felt like music was back, was playing the High Dive on a Saturday night and, people getting sweaty and having a good time. And, yeah, that was really good.
That's so cool. Did you guys headline?
That night we did, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so it feels good to do that.
High Dive is one of my favorite spots, because there's not a lot of space, so anybody and everybody who's there, like, you got to get kind of close and you got to get into it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the Denver cut your teeth spot too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think if you're a Denver musician and you say like High Dive is like the place,
Mm-hmm.
there's a Bluebird, of course, and there's Red Rocks, of course, but like
Mm-hmm.
getting to play the High Dive is like the place for Denver musicians to get to kind of cut their teeth and do it,
Definitely. What do you guys have in store in the future?
So we spent our pandemic just recording stuff because we didn't have any place to play. So we recently wrapped up doing kind of an EP type thing, or just a bunch of songs that we're just going to kind of release out one by one through the new label that we just signed with, the Salt Lick Records, which is a local DIY label that just started up, but quite the powerhouse team. Jason Edelstein, Andrea Wong, they're two folks who, you'll see them at any show here in Denver. Like, they go and see everybody. They're very supportive of everybody. They're very big on taking bands that don't necessarily fit into a specific genre and kind of combining them together. So we play with kind of, we call ourselves dystopian forest rock, which I think is something like a dark wave roots rock type of sound. And one of the other bands on the label, Milady, describes himself as, dreamy indie pop, and kind of in the vein of bands like Japanese Breakfast. But we play with them, we go to see each other's shows, and we do a lot of stuff together. And so this label is really interesting that they can combine these different types of people, help us to work together, help us to kind of both be very collaborative with each other and do stuff. So we're really excited about what we're going to be doing. Like I said, we got a lot of music we recorded that we're going to release. I know Milady has just recorded a lot of stuff that they're going to release, and the Salt Lick is just, like I said, just this powerhouse crew that is ready to kind of do a lot of stuff and really help the Denver music scene.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you guys.
Thanks.
That's so huge.
It's big, yeah. Coming off of last year where nothing was happening, and then into this, it's a little bit like, oh my God, there's so much going on.
So just before the interview, you were talking a little bit about how when the pandemic hit, you guys had no idea what was going to happen with Bear and the Beast. Yeah.
So I'm thinking like the timeline of the pandemic. You have like, we had just released a full-length album that we'd spent 4 years trying to record, and we had all these problems that kind of came with it. The mixing didn't work out, the recording didn't work out. We had lineup changes. It was just a whole big thing. So we were ecstatic to finally release it. We released it in January of 2020. Decided to go on the road with it. We go like, oh man, we come back from tour, and then boom, it's February 2020, and things just shut down.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there holding this, album that we'd spent thousands of dollars on and just years of work on, and then nothing. We couldn't do anything with it. So it was a very frustrating time. We took about early pandemic, we took, a couple months off because we couldn't meet anywhere to do anything. We were all kind of locked in. Came back mid-pandemic, kind of in the summer. We started to play a couple things, and the Black Lives Matters protests really started to ramp up. And I remember we had the first weekend of the protests, we had a show that weekend. And it really changed the way we thought about shows and music in general, because we were like, do we do music to promote ourselves? Is that really the appropriate thing to do? Do we take up more space? What do we do and how do we do it? And so we kind of came into that, took a lot of time to reflect, spent a lot of time just writing and talking and thinking about what it meant to be a musician in this time period. What do we do with this tool that we have? So we came back, and a lot of us were thinking, you can't make money doing music anymore. There's a good half of the band at least had kind of really set up their life that this was what they were going to do, and it caused a lot of us to rethink that. I think a bunch of them went to coding boot camps and stuff like that to rethink what it was. I know I thought like, okay, I don't think we're ever going to be doing live music as it is anymore either. So we spent the better part of 2020 just thinking about that and reanalyzing that. And it started to affect our music, how we wrote it, how we performed together, what type of shows we were doing, how we were using that space to bring a spotlight into some of the problems and systematic injustices that were going on in the country and the world. So we really we weren't sure what we were going to do. And then kind of as we did that, that's when we kind of, towards the end of 2020, we kind of teamed up with this Salt Lake team. They were doing live streams, same thing. They were, there's literally a couple friends of ours who were living in this house with this basement that flooded a lot. And so they called the video series Songs from the Pond because the basement. And we took this kind of like the situation where we didn't think it was going to happen. We started just playing there in this basement with our friends. And that kind of led to one thing. We're like, oh, well, let's just record a bunch of songs. Let's just do it. Like, we got nothing to lose. We have nowhere to go. Let's just record this stuff. And so we started just grinding and just started recording. And we found within that, not just kind of new inspiration and new direction, but we also found a way to lean on each other as musicians. I think before the pandemic, we were kind of, 6, 7 people. I think we were a 7-piece at the time. 7 people just coming into a room together, play on a Tuesday night, come to see shows and do that. But after that, we really became a group that, come and write songs, but also be very vulnerable about the things that were going on in our lives. If there was a family issue, we really made it a point to support each other and became much more tighter knit and much more intentional about the music we were writing.
That's incredible. Yeah. Did you find that brought about like more creativity, or did it just bring more cohesion to the band? And then do you think that you just produced better music after that as well?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think there was having the more cohesion. I think one of the things, when you start a band, the intention is kind of you have a bunch of individuals that kind of come into a room and they all think like, okay, well, I got to play the guitar part, and I'll play the drum part, and I'll play the bass part. I think as you mature as a band, you start to understand, well, it's not about creating more sound. It's about framing the silence. It's not, and so it's about saying, okay, well, I don't want to play here because I really need this part to just be open and have that space there for this other bass part or something to kind of come in there. And I think, especially as you get into bigger bands, we have a 6, 7-piece with a horn section and everything. It can become very difficult, or it can become very easy to just rush in and try to fill in all the space with with things. And so coming into that, as we spent more time together, we started to take a step back in our songwriting process and say like, no, I think it could be quiet here. I don't think we have to fill in this space here. I think I could let someone else take that spot. And it really involved listening for those other parts and listening what was going on with other people who were playing, and also trusting the people in your band to also do that. As a primary songwriter, it can be very difficult, I know, to you write these songs at home, and they can be very deeply personal, and they can be very meaningful to you, and then you bring them into a room with other people, and they're going to just tear it apart. They're going to say, let's try this, or does the verse need to be that long, or can you throw in some more words there? It's like, I don't know, I was just writing about something horribly traumatic in my life, but yeah, I'll just go ahead and throw that verse out. Who needs that? So it requires an enormous amount of trust in those people that they're not going to rip you apart when you're going to be vulnerable. And I think in that pandemic time period, in this time period, that's where we learned to respect the vulnerability. We learned you could come into that space and say, this is what's happening in my life. This is something, and you could be delicate with that, but at the same time, you knew that you could allow. This group of people, I can allow them to tear the song apart because I know that ultimately the integrity of the song is what they want to, and they want to do what's best for it, and they want to frame these things as best as possible. And I feel like they know that about me, that I'm not going to bring something to the table that is, bland, or something that's just kind of, I don't know, too feathery or too lighthearted, when I think the time period we live in calls for us to be very, very meaningful and intentional about what we're writing about.
So it's along that same line, like where do you really draw from usually when you write these songs then?
Yeah, I do. I kind of, part of my job, like my day job, requires that I have to read the news every day and just kind of stay abreast of it. So a lot of times when I don't know where to go, I might just pick a headline. So, I mean, there was like an article in The Atlantic that was just like, what's in the skies over Kabul? And I was like, what is in the skies over Kabul? Like, what is going on over there? And it kind of led to like, oh, well, what's in the skies over Kabul? It's like, I hear they're calling for rain. It's like rolling thunder of a C-17 loaded heavy with a rolling heavy with a loaded bay. And then you can kind of like take it and start to roll with that. I'm very inspired by a lot of what is going on in the hip hop scene right now, especially when we talk about protest music.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, as a white guy, you're like, where do I get my protest music from? You can look at Bob Dylan, but I think that's a little tired out. I think Run the Jewels does extraordinary, and Killer Mike does an extraordinary job of writing protest music, especially in the past year. I've been really amazed with their lyrics. And so I kind of take a look at what they're writing about and how they write it. And then I say, okay, well, how can I take a current event, or how can I take something and also write it from my perspective? Because I'm this half Korean, half white guy from Texas who lives in the suburbs of Denver. Like, my experience is extraordinarily different, but I feel like I still have something to say from that perspective. And I still think it's my responsibility to say something from that perspective.
That's incredible. So have you guys kind of shifted because earlier you were talking about like, okay, did we just promote our music to promote music? Have you guys kind of shifted? Have you kind of like jumped on a movement per se with your music, or is there something different that you're trying to promote with your music now than you had in the past?
Yeah, we've always been a band that's been very, I don't want to say political. I'd say just kind of with, like, let me put it this way, like when we kind of had our last full-length album released in 2016, we literally started it on election night in 2016 because I was just very disheartened. I remember talking to the band and they said, like, you know, it's not the end of the world. And it's like, it's not the end of the world, but, you know, at least half of America thought it was okay to elect someone who didn't like people like me, who didn't like people of color, who could say that so freely. At least half of America was okay with that. And if that's what it means to be an American, then we need to really take a step and analyze what that exactly means. So the album was called The American, and it analyzed these different aspects of it. From my own perspective, there was a song called Asian American, which was just about how, you know, I don't fit into the framework. Like, if I'm, as a Korean American, because of like how my family works, like, I'm not considered Korean in Korea. I'm not considered a white guy in America. So I don't really fit into any role. And at the same time, I feel like there is this idea of America that is where I'm supposed to fit. Langston Hughes has a great poem called Let America Be America Again, where he talks about how we all came to this country, whether by coercion, by force, or by own free will, to uphold this idea, and America has not been that idea. And so a lot of that album kind of talked about, like, how can we come back to that, and what is the reality, and how do we get there? So we've always been that way of a band. We've always kind of been a perspective. I think with 2020 and which forced us literally to sit in a room by ourselves, facing, like, looking into a mirror about what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a human being on this planet, with all the things that are going on? I think it kind of galvanized our mission, that we thought, like, okay, if writing about this stuff, you know, I felt a little silly at times about it. It's like, oh, I don't know, what do I got to say about this? I think after 2020, it was like, no, this is what we have to talk about. And, you know, we kind of do that. We also write songs that are also, you know, just kind of existential. You know, I don't think, you know, anyone is just like strictly like spends all day, every day, thinking about the ramifications of politics and what goes on. Like, there's a lot of times where I think as a millennial, you think, what does it mean to exist? Like, I'm, you know, in my 30s, and, you know, this world did not work out the way I was promised and how I thought it was going to work out. So there's a lot of also analyses of, well, how do I live? How do I exist? How do I deal with the trauma? How do I deal with, you know, what has been kind of given to me? And how do I move on from there? So I think, yeah, as a band, we've kind of just dug more into that and become more confident in that approach, and really started to identify as that's the kind of people we are, and that's the kind of music we want to write.
That's great. Did being kind of in that space, you were saying, like, you're not considered Korean in Korea, you're not considered American in America. Did that help shape your personal kind of musical journey at all? Did that help you help inspire you to get into music at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always say that like my musical style is just identity crisis music. Yeah, because I grew up a Korean American kid in Texas, so I always joke like I've gotten beat up for being Korean and for being white by every race, and all while in Texas. So it's like, how does that make any sense? Like I'm a Korean kid who wants to play kind of soul country music, and so there's a lot of kind of it doesn't make sense. What did make sense for me, and when I was a young kid, I think like a lot of kids, I got into punk rock first.
Nice.
Because it was angsty, you yell a lot, you skateboard, you could hang out with your friends, and it was just, you didn't have a car, you could like skateboard around, and that was just a really cool thing. And punk rock just was all about like finding a place of belonging amongst people who also didn't feel like they belong. And so I really resonated with me. And, as I kind of got older, punk rock also led me to a lot of country music. And I really got into a lot of like Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and a lot of the protest songs and kind of like really old country music and what that meant. And that kind of also led into a lot of soul music and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, music is really how I kind of found a place to belong in when I feel like I didn't have to belong anywhere. I always make the joke that that's the only way I know how to make friends is to get a group of people, stuff them in a room together once a week, and like force them to just play music with me. And then by sheer virtue of time together, it's like, well, hey, I guess we're friends now because we hang out together all the time. We all know the same song, so cool, you guys are my friends. And that's the only way I've ever known. And as I get older, and they always say, I always love the line like, "What was Jesus' greatest miracle? That he was in his 30s and had 12 friends."
I don't think I've heard that before. That's great.
It makes sense. And as a musician, I think that's how I do it. It's like, I have friends because I just keep playing, and I can't stop now because then I won't have any friends. And I mean, I probably would, but
it's different.
Yeah, I don't know how it would make any sense if I wasn't, complaining about like playing. Like, we got to play on a Sunday night. Come on, guys.
We got to play it a Sunday night at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we're going to pack the house.
Oh, yeah.
That's the worst. That's really great, man. And I'm totally with you. When I find musicians that I just really jive with, that I can become friends with, even if I just like found them on Craigslist or, through a friend of a friend, I think it just makes the music all that much better. I've always been told that when you're forming a band, it can be about the music or it can be about like the hang, just hanging with the peeps. And almost everybody wants to go with the hang. If you can just like spend time with people in a room week after week and tolerate each other and become friends, then whatever you produce is going to be way better than if you just have like, all right, this is exactly what we're doing. It's super clear cut and whatnot.
And that's something I think as I've played more often, that's what I think I realize is more essential. I used to think that it was all about like you had to find the best musicians and you have to like play together and that's how you do it. I got lucky and I did find like some of the best musicians I've ever played with. Justin Peterson, who plays trumpet with me, you know Justin. I would love to tell the story of how Justin joined the band, because Justin, I literally put out a Craigslist ad for a horn section, and he replies back like, "Well, you guys practice on Tuesdays, right? That's the only night I'm not doing anything. So I guess I'll hang out with you guys." 5 years later, we're great friends. We've traveled, like we've been drunk on Bourbon Street together, like playing shows and stuff like that. But and he's an extraordinary trumpet player. But how the band stays together, I think, is that friendship. Like, there's been, he is so good that there's a lot of times I think like, why are you playing with us? Like, you could be playing anywhere with anybody. Like, why would you be here with us? And I think it's just because we just like being together. And so that's what keeps the band together. That's what keeps the cohesion going, and that's what can far outlast any type of specific like skill or technical ability is. If you just feel like you can be yourself around these people, like I said, you can be vulnerable around them. Yeah. You can do a lot more.
And Justin keeps it real.
He does.
You got to give a shout out to Justin. He's a great musician to work with.
Yeah.
Love playing with him. Love being in a meeting with him. Love being in a room with him. And just like sometimes he's just talking all business and music, and then sometimes he'll just say like the weirdest shit, and you're like, that's like so cool, and I love it. But like, where did that come from?
I've always joked as like I just want like a B-roll footage of just him just saying his things. Like He'll say things out of left field, and it'll oscillate between like extraordinarily academic. He'll be like, "Oh yes, the penultimate note in this phrase," and he'll just talk about this like obscure theory thing, and then he'll say something like normally crass, just like a fifth grader who just learned a curse word. He'll say something like that. It's all in the same breath, and you're like, this one person,
he's the best. So speaking of being vulnerable around your bandmates, you have a song that you sent us that we're going to be playing today. Why don't you walk us through this song that you sent us?
Yeah, Double Life was off of the American. It's a little bit, it's kind of more on the existential kind of end of it, but Double Life was kind of written in 3 points of my life accidentally. I kind of started writing it, and then I was like, I don't know where to go with this, and then I'd come back a year later, write the second verse, and I was like, I don't know where to go, and then finally finish it at the end. Double Life began when I was a high school teacher, and it was like the song like, oh, this double life I lead, the steady-handed shepherd, the sailor lost at sea. And it was this idea that I'd walk in this classroom telling these teenagers like, this is how you're going to live life. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, how am I supposed to tell you how to do life?
Yeah.
And I think it's like also, and it kind of translated to, I think a lot of us are doing that. Mm-hmm. We feel like we're in roles where we need to present a sunny face to kind of keep everything like happy and going, when the reality is like we don't have any idea what's going on. And I think so. Like I read that kind of part later on. I was a gardener, and I was just kind of like sitting there gardening. It's like, oh, the pills that I take to keep my mind at bay, oh, the lies I say when I say I'm doing great, and kind of the same thing. Just this, you're suffering inside, and yet you're still there just like pulling the weeds, just kind of going through the day by day. How you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm great. You don't say what you really are. You don't say like, oh, it's miserable. Like my dog just died this week. I don't know how I'm going to get to the next step. And I think we do that for a couple reasons. I think we feel like we don't want to give this sense of that we're weak or that we can't, that we're not strong. As a teacher, I think you're kind of always having to be like, oh yeah, like I know all the answers. Like, is this a chemistry problem? Yes, I know it all, because you feel like you can't show a chink in the armor and let the kids see you kind of crumble, or else they'll eat you alive. Oddly enough, I think that the opposite is actually the truth. I think if you can show some vulnerability, kids will love you even more. But I also think there's this feeling, especially here in America, we don't want to burden other people with our difficulties. And we feel like if we said something like, oh, it's tough. Like, I don't know how I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and, my wife just got sick. I don't know how I'm going to do that. We don't want to throw that burden on there. And I think, Double Life is also about that kind of rugged individualism that is so detrimental to our mental health, to our ability to function as a society. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that song goes, and kind of how I felt going through it. And, there's even kind of the recurring chorus line, like, because if you knew the man I am, surely there your love would end. So I'll just keep all these secrets buried beneath. Like, I can't tell you, because if you knew who I really was, if you knew the sins that I had committed, if you knew the pain I was going, you wouldn't want to be there for me. You wouldn't care, and you'd want to walk out. And so I think it's about that fear. And the song ends very open-ended. It doesn't have a happy ending, because I don't think for a lot of us there is a happy ending just yet.
All right, let's put a pin in this, because I definitely want to come back, but let's go ahead and listen to Double Life by Bear and the Beast.
Shepherd, a sailor lost at sea. Beneath the shine, there's a darkness deep inside, and it's keeping me awake in the night. No, my cross, my regret, no, the sins I failed to confess. If you knew the man I am, surely there your love would end. So I'll I'll be keeping all my secrets buried deep. Too much time to think, and no time left to breathe. All the current pulls me underneath the wave. All the pills that I take to keep my mind at bay. All the lies I say when I say I'm doing great. 'Cause I'm a rock, I'm a stone. Oh, I'm a myth out alone. 'Cause if you knew the man I am, surely they all love would end. So I'll be keeping all my secrets buried deep. Troubadour, selling my wares door to door. Oh, a penny for your hopes and fears. 'Cause if our hearts are on display, see we're all the same. We're all just laughing, laughing, laughing through our tears. All the while betrayed. All this image of me. 'Cause if you knew the man I am, surely they all love would end. So I'll be keeping all my secrets buried deep. 'Cause if you knew the man I am, surely they all love would end. So I'll be keeping all my secrets buried deep. Oh.
That was like a really great song, man.
Thanks.
I loved when you explained the lyrics beforehand, because then I really listened in on those choruses,
Yeah.
and they were really great.
Thanks.
So think, kind of speaking in the same vein of like living your double life, like what are you doing right now to try to like take care of that maybe that person that's kind of like lying underneath?
Yeah, wow. Things I'm doing right now. I've kind of, I guess it's trying to bring the two lives kind of into one thing together. I think part of that is taking the anxiety and the painful part of life sometimes, and just sitting with it for longer periods of time. How do I put that better? I guess something I think. I remember listening to a Chris Christopherson record talking about Willie Nelson, and he said he wrote this. He was talking about writing this song about Willie Nelson, who was just about to take the stage, and he was sitting backstage, and he said, the song kind of has a line that goes something like, "Somebody dared you into feeling, so play one for me." I think as a musician, part of our job is to be dared into feeling, to feel the things in their most raw and their most difficult. It means when you're in kind of pain of heartache from a breakup or some sort of loss, you have to feel that fully. And you have to feel it fully for everyone who's listening.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that means that you can't numb that sensation. You have to be there with it throughout every aspect of that pain. And if that pain involves keeping you up all night, then you've got to be ready to be up all night with it. And if that pain means that you have to, you just have to spend days and days on end with like the thoughts kind of like churning in your mind, like kind of like when you wake up in the middle of the night with a song lyric, but you only have like 3 words of the song in your head and it just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. You have to be there for that. I think because of that, that's why we see musicians and artists have the highest rates of mental illness and suicide. Because in the effort to be there for those things, it can be extraordinarily overwhelming. And it can be very, very difficult to the point where a lot of times people will try to numb that, whether it's through drugs, alcohol. I'd even go so far as saying, I run a lot, and I've recognized that running is one of my addictions. Sometimes I'll just run, and it's 26 miles later, and people will say, "Oh, that's a really healthy thing." And I'll say, "Maybe not, because am I just doing it just to not feel something else?" We may work long hours. We may, and this is not just musicians, but everybody. We may do a lot of things to not feel that pain, or to not feel whatever sensation it may be, the joy even. But that is, I think for me, in the internal struggle. And so that's why I'm not sure if I've still lived the double life, but I think the desire and the goal is to find ways to progressively more and more learn to sit with those moments, the anxiety, the joys, the trauma, and to not walk away from it. And however long it may take, whatever it may take, and to not, try to numb it or try to walk away from it. It's extraordinarily difficult. I don't know if I'm there yet, but it's something I try to do every day.
Yeah. Sitting with it is very, very tough.
Yeah.
Very difficult, especially if you've...
Yeah. I know, throughout, I'd always kind of like I said, I got into country music, so naturally I just got into shooting whiskey all the time, smoking tons of cigarettes.
Yeah.
So much of that became, I started to associate my identity as like that kind of person, as just like, oh, well, if I'm going to write country songs that are really raw, I need to be equally raw. And the only way I can do that is a pack of Marlboros and, a bottle of Jim Beam or something like that. I think one of the things I'm trying to do now is I think I can be more raw without that. I think I could be more honest. I think I could find a person that is extraordinarily not that, not the person who does not think that needs to be that person. Like there is an authentic self. And if I can find who that person is and write from that voice, then I know someone else is going to hear that and it's going to resonate with them, like very, very deep in their core. Because I know I'm not the only person who feels that way. I know there's got to be someone else who connects that way and someone else who equally feels that if they're doing some image, they need to hear that there's like someone else who's also kind of saying it's okay to not always have to perform all the time, I guess.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be yourself.
Yeah.
So many people are afraid to be themselves, and I've been in that same boat.
Yeah.
I think we all have at some point, and I think a lot of people never get out of it, to be honest. But I think it's just so cool that you're kind of here talking about this double life, because everybody leads one, regardless of how healthy they are physically, mentally. I mean, everybody has second thoughts. We all have our own mental doubts, but I think voicing those and talking with somebody about those is so important. I'll speak on my personal behalf. I mean, that's when my life started to really turn around, was when I started to talk with somebody, when I found a therapist, and I was like, okay, I got some stuff I got to say, and just saying it out loud and then seeing what they had to say in regards to it. And of course it wasn't like, wow, what a fucked up life you lead. You know, it's like, okay, cool. So like I've heard you, like, let's keep on talking through it. What do you want to change? How do you think this affects you? And it's like, I always contribute my therapist to being like somebody who spots you when you're weightlifting. Yeah. Like they're there just in case you can't do it on your own, but they're not doing the heavy lifting. You're doing the heavy lifting. They're just there to like make sure that you succeed.
Right.
And so I think it's such a great thing that I'm very fortunate to have gotten into, in the years past. And so I think it's just really wonderful that, you're here kind of saying the same thing, that we just really need to get this out, and it's not a weakness to talk about it.
Yeah. And kind of like piggyback on what you mentioned with like kind of the athletic aspect of it. I know like one of the things I've had my therapist also mention was, you don't go out and you don't just start lifting 350 pounds right off the bat. Like it takes incremental steps. It takes small things. You don't go start off and, walk into the room and say like, you know what, let me tell you, this awful trauma that happened to me. Like, my dad died at this age and my mom like had to do all this. And you don't start there. Like it can start with something as simple as like, oh man, I didn't feel good today. Like, why did I not feel? And you can just sit in these kind of small moments and incrementally start to work you there. But learning that vulnerability, especially I think when we're taught so much that it's not okay to be vulnerable. It's this rugged individualism. It's all about, suck it up and move on. It does take time to develop those kind of emotional and mental muscles as well. And we can, like, I think music is a great way to allow us to also develop those muscles with the listener as well. I think if someone can, like, I know there's been so many songs that I can think of where if I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, if they can say it, if they can feel that, then it's okay for me to feel it. And maybe I can sit with these other feelings, and maybe I can be honest with myself about these things. I think that's what art and music does for us. Gives us that way into that feeling.
Man, it's such a cool thing. I feel very fortunate to be a musician, to be able to convey my emotions this way. Did you originally start using music as a way to convey your emotions, or were you just kind of like trying to do some country stuff that wasn't really related per se, but just trying to like fit in the country scene? Or?
I originally started music because I wanted to get girls. Classic. Honestly, myself. I started playing. I always make the joke like a good Korean kid. I started playing piano at 5. So I started playing that very, very early on. When I got to about 15, I was like, okay, piano's not cool. I need a guitar. Piano was totally cool. I don't know why I made that decision, but guitars are cool. You can stand and move around with a guitar. And so I started to do that. But I think over the years, as I realized it was a tool for that, I started to lean into that more. At first it was just kind of angsty. It was just like, breakup song, like, and that kind of stuff. And then especially I remember listening to, a friend of mine gave me a Johnny Cash anthology, and it was called Murder. And it was every song that Johnny Cash wrote about murder. And it was like 30, 40 songs about it. And, some people talk about, they say like, oh, Johnny Cash, like he was so cool. Like that dude was real messed up, man. Like he had some crazy weird songs about shooting his wife with a submachine gun and burying her in the middle of Alaska. Like it's crazy songs.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to think like, oh, I can start to talk about this in other ways. And I can start to talk about other things that are deeply affecting me and maybe more resonant with me. I think that, but as I've kind of gotten older, I've also tried this trick where I wake up now and I get up at like 4 a.m. to write songs, and I make it the first thing I do. So, I start the coffee or tea or whatever, and then for the first 30 minutes, I just have to stare at a blank page. That's all I have to do. Look at the blank page. I don't have to do anything, but I just have to write whatever is on my mind in that like between sleep and waking up kind of moment. And I found that like some of my most honest, raw stuff happens there. I remember one particular morning, I was really, really hungover, and I was like, I do not want to do this. This is the most awful thing. Like I am still sweating whiskey right now. This is awful. And I just told myself, I was like, all right, just write whatever is like, you're trying to like don't try to think of anything. Just write what's going on. And I just write down, it's like, I'm the kind of guy who can't have just one drink. I was like, holy shit. And from there is like, it's just one and then another till they ask me to leave. And I've spent so many mornings ruminating over last night's sins that I can't remember who I am or even who I've been. And that was just like hungover, first 5 minutes of waking up before work. And it blew me away. I was like, where did that come from? Where did that honesty come from? And while music was originally just about getting girls, it's become now something that I find that when I'm not expecting it, when I really like kind of can get myself into the right groove and kind of motion and habit of doing it, things that I don't even realize I'm thinking, things I don't even realize I'm feeling start to come out. and find themselves in there.
That's awesome. I've done the same thing, just waking up and being like, oh, I need to write this down really quick.
Yeah.
That's really great, though. Why don't you tell us where you can find all your music and where we can find you on the socials and all that good stuff?
So yeah, we're all on the interwebs. So we're on Spotify, Apple Music, those kind of good things. Just Bear and the Beasts. BearandTheBeasts.com is our website. You can also find us on Instagram, Bear and the Beasts, Facebook, those big things. And just, yeah, we play all over through Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, all throughout Colorado. And like I said, we have new music coming out, so we'll be on the road quite a bit over the next couple months in the next year.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us on The Flow Within. I'm your host, Tony G. Big thanks to Bear Redmond for sticking around and chatting with us. Bear, thanks so much for coming on here and chatting. It was great.